Imagine an entire army, 5,000 trained soldiers, marching into the wild northern frontier of Britain and never coming back. No survivors stumbling home with a story to tell, no burial mounds, no abandoned weapons scattered across a battlefield. Just silence. One day they're one of the most feared fighting forces in the entire Roman Empire, and the next, they simply vanish from the pages of history, as if the earth itself swallowed them whole. This is the mystery of the Ninth Legion, and even 2,000 years later, historians are still trying to figure out exactly what happened to them. To understand just how strange this disappearance really is, you first have to understand how powerful the Ninth Legion actually was. Known as Legio IX Hispana, this wasn't some ragtag group of untrained fighters. It was one of the most elite and battle-hardened units in the entire Roman military machine, with a service record stretching back over 100 years before its disappearance. The Ninth had fought in Spain, helping Rome crush rebellions there, which is where it earned its name. It had served under Julius Caesar himself during his campaigns. It had marched through Gaul, through Germania, and eventually into Britain as part of the Roman invasion force that began conquering the island in 43 AD. These weren't just soldiers, they were career professionals, hardened veterans who had survived decades of brutal warfare across the empire. A unit like this vanishing wasn't just unusual, it was almost unthinkable. By the early 2nd century, the Ninth Legion had been stationed in Britain for decades, helping to hold the northern frontier of Roman territory against the fierce local tribes who refused to submit to Roman rule. Their last confirmed base was a fortress at Eboracum, the Roman name for what is now the city of York in northern England. Archaeological evidence places them there as late as 108 AD, with inscriptions and building work confirming their presence at the fortress. But after that date, something changes. The historical record, which had tracked this legion's movements for over a century, simply goes quiet. No triumphant return, no mention of a crushing defeat, no official record of disbandment. They were stationed at the edge of Roman Britain, and then, as far as history is concerned, they were never heard from again. This silence is what makes the mystery so compelling. In the ancient world, Rome was meticulous about record-keeping. Legions were tracked, their movements documented, their losses reported back to the Senate and eventually the emperor. When a legion suffered a catastrophic defeat, like the infamous destruction of 3 legions in the Teutoburg Forest in Germany almost a century earlier, it was recorded as a national tragedy, discussed and mourned for generations. But with the Ninth Legion, there's no equivalent record, no formal announcement of their fate. It's almost as though the standard bureaucratic process the Romans usually followed simply broke down, and that absence of information has left a 2,000-year-old gap that historians are still trying to fill. So what actually happened to them? Over the centuries, 3 major theories have emerged, each trying to explain how an entire legion could vanish so completely. The first theory, and probably the most dramatic, is that the Ninth Legion was wiped out in a massive military disaster somewhere in the unconquered territories of northern Britain, likely in what is now Scotland. This theory suggests the legion was sent north to deal with rebellious Caledonian tribes, people the Romans had never fully subdued, and that they were ambushed and annihilated in hostile territory, much like the legions lost at the Teutoburg Forest in Germany almost a century earlier. Some historians have pointed to later Roman writings that mention heavy losses suffered by the army in Britain around this period, suggesting a defeat serious enough that the emperor may have deliberately avoided publicizing it to prevent embarrassment or panic back in Rome. If a full legion had truly been slaughtered in a foreign land far from the empire's heartland, and if that failure reflected poorly on Roman military prestige, it's entirely plausible that officials chose silence over admission. The problem with this theory, however, is that there's still no definitive archaeological evidence, no mass battlefield, no discovered war memorial that conclusively proves this happened in Britain specifically, though the theory remains popular and dramatically satisfying. The second major theory is far less dramatic, but arguably just as plausible: disease. Roman military camps, especially large ones housing thousands of soldiers in close quarters, were notoriously vulnerable to outbreaks of illness. Poor sanitation, contaminated water supplies, and the simple reality of thousands of people living in tight, unhygienic conditions created perfect breeding grounds for infectious disease. If a severe epidemic swept through the Ninth Legion's ranks while they were stationed at the frontier, it could have decimated their numbers gradually rather than in one single dramatic event. Under this theory, the Legion wouldn't have vanished in a single battle at all. Instead, it may have been slowly worn down over months or years by illness, desertion, and gradual reassignment of survivors to other units, until what remained was so diminished that the Legion effectively ceased to exist as an independent fighting force. This theory is less cinematic, but it fits with what historians know about how devastating disease could be in ancient military settings, and it would also explain why there's no single dramatic battle record, because there may not have been one single battle to record. The third theory takes a different angle entirely, suggesting the Ninth Legion wasn't destroyed in Britain at all, but was instead transferred elsewhere in the Empire and met its end somewhere else entirely, possibly in a later, less documented conflict. Some historians argue that fragments of evidence, roof tiles, and inscriptions bearing the Ninth Legion's name have been found in locations far from Britain, including sites near the Rhine frontier in what is now the Netherlands, dating from a period after their supposed disappearance in York. If accurate, this would suggest the Legion wasn't wiped out in Britain, but was actually relocated as part of a broader military reshuffling common throughout the Roman Empire, and that it may have met its actual end during a completely different, poorly recorded campaign years later, perhaps against Parthian forces in the east, or amid the chaotic wars along the Rhine. Under this theory, the disappearance isn't really a mystery of annihilation at all. It's simply a gap in record-keeping, made more mysterious over time by the romantic idea of a lost legion swallowed by the wild British frontier. Each of these theories has its defenders among historians, and each has its own gaps and unanswered questions. The rebellion and battlefield destruction theory captures the imagination because it fits the romantic image of Roman soldiers marching bravely into hostile, unconquered territory and never returning. The disease theory is grounded in the harsh medical realities of ancient military life, though it lacks the dramatic finality people are drawn to. And the relocation theory is perhaps the most historically cautious, relying on physical evidence found elsewhere in the Empire, though it somewhat deflates the legend that has grown around the Legion's supposed British demise. What makes the Ninth Legion's story endure, even after 2,000 years, isn't just the mystery of their fate, it's what that mystery represents. Even the most powerful, disciplined, and battle-tested force in the ancient world could simply disappear from the historical record, leaving behind nothing but scattered clues, faded inscriptions, and centuries of speculation. It's a humbling reminder of just how much of history has been lost entirely, swallowed not by mythical monsters or curses, but by the simple passage of time and the imperfect nature of record-keeping, even in one of the most bureaucratically organized empires the world has ever known. So after everything we've explored, the powerful legacy of this legion, their last known position on the edge of Roman civilization, and the three competing explanations historians have proposed, what do you think really happened to the Ninth Legion? Were they slaughtered by tribes in the unconquered north? Did disease quietly wipe them out from within? Or were they simply transferred elsewhere, their so-called disappearance nothing more than a gap in the historical paper trail? Let us know what you think in the comments below.